The evidence is becoming clearer and clearer, and is pointing to the idea that SARS-CoV-2, aka the honey badger virus, is a human-made creation. Looks like it came from a lab.
All right, what's going on?
Just let me think about where to start.
Well, he saw something. What is it?
I saw a virus. I think some kind of disease.
A virus? Like what? Like SARS?
I don't know. All I know is that it's highly infectious. It may be fatal. Right now, we could all be infected. If we take this outside, we risk the whole town.
Johnny, how big is this gonna get?
I don't know. We just have to do everything we can to stop this, starting right now, Walt.
He's right. All right, here's what's gonna happen. We need to make sure that everybody that's inside stays inside. I'm gonna get a few deputies on it. We'll call it a lockdown.
Lockdown?
Well, until I come up with something better.
Walt, no. No, you cannot lock the school doors with...
This is for your family's safety.
Will I get sick too?
Yeah.
Maybe we should wear masks. What difference does it make? According to you, we've already been exposed. Let's get one thing straight, Mr. Smith. I'm responding to political pressure. You have no reason to be scared. Let me ask you something, Amy. Animals. You've been around any animals in the backyard, even, let's say, a skunk, a raccoon? I'm going to swab the inside of your mouth with this little Q-tip, trying to get a handle on this animal. Damn efficient airborne transmission. Blood tests and swabs aren't telling us much. We know it acts like a virus. It causes high fever and respiratory distress. Tracking and treating a mysterious outbreak like this would take the CDC months.
We better get started then. For anyone who hasn't been exposed already needs to wear a mask.
China. Isn't that where flu viruses come from?
Yeah, a lot of viruses come from there.
International flight to China?
That's no coincidence. Whatever it is, it originated in China.
Time is not on our side.
It's like looking for a needle in a needle stack.
We have ruled out all the usual suspects: influenza, SARS, bacterial pneumonia.
How long is it going to take?
Well, it took 34 days to isolate the coronavirus that caused SARS, and that's fast.
I'm authorizing a quarantine on everyone who's come in contact with a symptomatic person.
There's got to be something I can do.
On the enzyme, this virus leads when they were
So the chloroquine did this. So the chloroquine.
Chloroquine.
This is it. This is your virus.
I'm sorry, but there's no cure for that.
Chloroquine, that's an anti-malarial drug.
No. Listen, it suppresses the enzymes.
Welcome back, you damn fool.
What happened?
We started everyone on chloroquine, stopped the thing dead in its tracks. Now, the CDC would have figured it out eventually, but not in time.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind that China has a biological weapons program. The US State Department a number of years ago said as much. And it's clear that they have the scientific capability to be able to do this at an extremely advanced way, in a way that only a small number of countries would be able to. Russia would be another one. Iran is often said to have similar biological weapons programs, but I think it's highly likely that China would have similar research being undertaken.
Now, you said that a weapons laboratory would be very disappointed, to produce a virus that knocked out so few people. On the other hand, looking at the economic devastation that this virus has caused, nevertheless, what conclusions might a biological weapons researcher draw from about our susceptibility?
there are 2 points that are really worth bringing out here. One is that I'm absolutely sure that military organisations will be looking at this. They'll be carefully looking at the damage that is happening to military organisations themselves, having to lock down with military people with coronavirus. And they will be thinking, military planners will be thinking to themselves, wow, this would be a great way to distract states if we were getting ready to attack them. The other thing with regard to China is biological weapons program or not, I think China is now taking the view that it wants to emerge out of the coronavirus crisis more successful than any of the democracies. And it's working very hard to do that. It's trying to find strategic advantage of this and some advantage in the possibility that they have come out of this a month or two ahead of other countries. So therefore, what can they do in the developing world, for example, to now present themselves as the saviours of small countries with battling coronavirus? So, China is looking for strategic advantage, which of course is what it always does.
Now we see that with China increasing its soft diplomacy, it's been sending all this aid, medical equipment around the world. But of course, we don't know whether people are going to say thank you for that, or blame it for the virus, or blame it for holding up knowledge in the West of what was actually going on.
I think in Australia, I really hope that this is the wake-up call we've needed, Andrew, to stop being naive about the relationship we have with China and to understand that the Chinese Communist Party is looking to gain advantage over us, not to partner with us. And I think you can see that, for example, in how the directive from the party magically went out to Chinese companies in Australia to buy up all of our medical protective equipment at the end of January, at a time when Chinese diplomats were saying, oh, the problem is under control and there's nothing for you to worry about. So Australians, I think, are smart people, and I'm hoping that this is going to lead to a rebalancing, a more sceptical attitude towards the China relationship. In other countries, though, that might not be the case. If you look at the Pacific Islands, Papua New Guinea, elsewhere, they may just be grateful for the assistance they're receiving and the cash that's flowing into the pockets of the elites. And that is a concern. I think if China comes out of this attempting to cement more effective relations with countries in the Pacific region, that's not going to be good for our interests, and we'll need to do our best to be a more consistent and helpful friend to those countries than China ever will be.
Scientists are tired of explaining why the COVID-19 virus was not made in a lab. This is in sciencealert.com. It's a rumor that just won't die, they write in an exasperated tone of voice here. When asked whether COVID-19 virus was genetically engineered in a lab, scientists have already said no, rather firmly. But the matter of the new coronavirus's origin is unlikely to be put to rest so easily. Back in late March, we covered a study published in Nature Medicine in which the researchers investigated the genomic data of SARS-CoV-2, particularly the receptor binding domain sections of the virus, to try and discover how it mutated into the virulent and deadly version we're currently struggling to contain. Well, that's easy. It's got a polybasic furin cleavage site added to it. That's how it's so bad. As a byproduct of the research, they were able to determine that SARS-CoV-2 was not genetically manipulated. Now, how could that be? How can you determine that? So you can't actually say that. You want to know why? Because you look at certain technologies like this, and there are people who are in labs that have created entire genomes of various viruses without any signatures, and like there's a digital thumbprint that you might be able to find, if you're doing computer forensics. Well, what you would want to see is there some specific sequence of nucleotides that if you saw that, it would say that, oh, they were using a certain plasmid or a certain technology, or there was a certain snip and tuck. Nope, they have fully 100% recreated. Some labs have been able to fully recreate viruses with no alterations, just 100% the genome that you see without any telltale fingerprints going on in there. So you cannot actually determine it was not genetically manipulated just by looking at the genome. So this is crap what they're saying right here, pure crap. By comparing the available genome sequence data for known coronavirus strains, we can firmly determine that SARS-CoV-2 originated through natural processes. One of the researchers, immunist Christian Anderson. Christian Anderson. Oh, yeah, there we go. So you write the paper that proves that proves that this thing came from a natural origin, and then later you get quoted and you say, you quote yourself, I guess. But here's the thing, comparing available genome sequence data to that of known coronavirus strains, how can you firmly determine this came through natural processes? Because when we do that, when we actually look at the genomic data, what do we find? We find that there's SARS-CoV-2 all by itself, way out here, all on it in its own family tree, with nothing that we can show for it here to show how, how, I don't even understand how that virologist can say that definitively and say, looking at known genomes, we can confidently say this thing's natural origin. Really? Where did it get that polybasic furin cleavage site from? Not from its neighbors, not from any of its closest relatives. So that's a little bit of a hop, skip, and a jump, don't you think? At least enough where you have to soften that, and you can't be this declarative. It's this level of declaration here. By comparing available genome sequence data for known coronavirus strains, we can firmly determine that SARS-CoV-2 originated through natural processes. I'm not sure how you do that, because you can't look at the genome sequence data I've got and say anything except, wow, it's really weird that this thing somehow came up with its own furin cleavage site way over here all on its own. Two features of the virus, the mutations in the receptor binding domain portion of the spike protein and its distinct backbone, rules out laboratory manipulation as potential origin for SARS-CoV-2. This is the whole, it's too complex for a computer to have created it, so it can't have been done. And then they continue on. Look at this declarative language here. Although it is clear, now that we've established that the virus was not created in the lab, there have been ongoing concerns it may have escaped a research facility, with most of the speculation understandably focused on the Wuhan Institute of Virology. However, just remains speculation. The Washington Post recently reported the U.S. Embassy officials had safety concerns about the lab back in 2018, and the Institute did keep a closely related bad virus, but even that's far from a smoking gun. No, you know what the smoking gun is? PRRA. It's that polybasic furin cleavage site, which somehow came out of nowhere on the family tree and was just parked in there. And oh, by the way, just happens to be the place that all these gain-of-function virologists monkey with all the time, because it's a well-known fact for both many of the influenza viruses as well as the coronaviruses that you need to have that site. And if you can put that site in just the right spot on the spike protein, especially the S2, that you give, and you confer massive gain of function on that particular virus. So I would say, even though I'm not a world-leading virologist, that I can't look at this wheel and say that there's any case to be made for the genetic sequence of this supporting the idea that it has a close relative that we can look at where it got that polybasic furin cleavage site. And again, this is an insert, not a mutation. If it was a simple case of, well, 2 or 3 mutations and we got here and this one was close, all right, I could buy that. We don't have that. We've got a giant insert in here that gives this thing its gain of function. That's really, really bad ass. All right. Conclusions for today. The press needs to ask one question only. Don't be distracted by all of this complicated, we've run huge computational simulations, oh my gosh, our genetic blah, blah, blah. No, here's your question. You ready for this, journalist? How did that polybasic furin cleavage site, PRRA, get into COVID-19? Full stop. As soon as you answer that, effectively, we can move on to the next set of questions I've got, but that's it. Let's just start, if we could just focus on that. How did that cleavage site get into COVID-19, right? That's the important question. And I'm super disappointed with the dissembling, and I think what even amounts to overt lying and cover your CYA behavior of what appears to be a significant portion of the U.S. virology community. And just to yeah, I skipped over. Let me go back to this. This is Francis Collins, director of National Institute of Health, right? March 26th. Look at this stuff. No matter where you go online these days, there's bound to be discussion of coronavirus disease. Some folks are even making outrageous claims that the new coronavirus causing the pandemic was engineered in a lab and deliberately released to make people sick. Well, see, he made a jump there I wouldn't have made. I don't know if it was deliberately released or not. Beats me. So, let's not conflate those two things. So I think that's some sophistry right there. It's like, oh, you believe it was engineered, then you also must believe it was deliberately released. No, back up. Separate concepts. This one requires speculation as to intent. This one, engineered, just requires us to look at the available data and ask some questions from which we can deduce certain things. So let's not put those two together. A new study debunks such claims by providing scientific evidence that this novel coronavirus arose naturally. Oh, I wonder what study that could be. The reassuring findings are the result of genomic analysis conducted by an international research team, partly supported by NIH. Oh, there's the conflict right there. In their study in the journal Nature Medicine, Christian Anderson, Scripps Research Institute of La Jolla, California, Robert Gary, and their colleagues used sophisticated bioinformatic tools to compare publicly available genomic data from several coronaviruses, including the new one that causes COVID-19. Certainly sounds very authoritative. The researchers began by homing in on the parts of the coronavirus genomes that encode the spike proteins that give this family of viruses their distinctive crown-like appearance. All coronaviruses rely on these spike proteins to infect other cells, but blah, 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 blah. Look at this. So here's the director of the NIH coming out and citing this same study here, the one that just skipped right over PRRA, gave it a little bit of short shrift over here, and then just wandered off into its conclusion territory, which was, this thing is guaranteed came from natural place, came from a natural setting. It was not purposely manipulated. You can't actually deduce that from the genomic sequence because, again, there are ways to take the genomic sequence of viruses and completely manufacture them from scratch and not leave a single fingerprint. So you can't actually look at the genetic sequence and say squat about it, as far as I understand it. All right, so this dissembling, overt lying CYA behavior, of these people, I would feel better if these virologists in the United States would say something more honest, like, hey, this looks really bad. I'm a little bit worried. I got to be honest. My whole career, my reputation, my paycheck are all kind of dependent on this research continuing. And listen, here's what we know for sure, and here's what we don't know for sure. Listen, we can't ever say for sure whether something has been monkeyed with or not, because the way the technology has progressed at this point in time, you could recreate an entire virus from scratch and not leave a single fingerprint. So we can't be sure based on looking at the sequence as well. Secondarily, when we look at this, we admit there's a big jump there. How this got this 12 nucleotide insert in there, which conferred magically a polybasic furin cleavage site, that's a mystery too. What would really be best is if we could go out and find a natural virus that actually mirrors this one perfectly, or close enough that we could say we got there. And by the way, everything that's kind of close, the rat TG13, the pangolin, everything we can find that's sort of close, none of them have that furin cleavage site. The kinds we've been monkeying with as gain-of-function researchers all these years. I know it looks bad, but here's why I happen to think that this is actually natural, right? Okay, that would be great. So and I don't want to cast aspersions on the entire virology community. I'm saying at least those who've been monkeying with gain-of-function research, they seem to be the ones who are most interested in coming out and muddying the waters right now. And by the way, both the US and China, up to their virologist eyeballs in this story. And again, not virologists, the gain-of-function virologist eyeballs. Let's just be clear. That seems to be a fairly small club that were involved in this stuff at this point. And by the way, these sorts of studies should never have been done. The things we could have learned from them was tiny compared to the amount of damage that could be done by this. And if this turns out to have been a gain-of-function research experiment that went bad, whether it was released deliberately, accidentally, unintentionally, intentionally, doesn't matter. It happened. And if that's the case and that's the story, there's a lot that has to be answered for, because this has been one of the most destructive economic events of anybody's lifetime. And that should have been a foreseen consequence. Somebody should have been asking that question. Hey, what if one of these things got out? And the fact that they didn't ask that question or answer it appropriately, and meaning they still decide to go ahead with it, however you look at it, this is now out of the bag. So that's as far as I'm going to go with this story. I think I don't have to go much further than that. To me, this is the one thing I would focus on. I wouldn't get PRRA. I wouldn't get too wrapped up in anything else about this at this point in time. And until that question is answered, I'm going to have to fall very heavily on the side of believing that this was an intentional insertion of a polybasic furin cleavage site in order to explore and unravel the mysteries of how a virus penetrates a cell. I think it was a gain-of-function research experiment that was both successful and then unsuccessful because of what happened next. I just don't think we're getting out of the woods on this particular virus anytime soon. It's got a lot of tricks up its sleeve, and the problem is that particular furin cleavage site that it has, one of the reasons it's so bad, so badass, is because there are both intracellular, meaning inside the cell, and extracellular, out in the bloodstream and in the lymphatic tissues. There are proteases existing both inside and outside of cells that can help activate this virus. So that means that it's really, really particularly good at infecting people and getting inside our cells and doing a lot of damage. And by the way, with both ACE2 and CD147 receptors, it has a lot of different places that it can attack inside the body. That's what makes it particularly bad, and that's why we shouldn't have been monkeying around with these sorts of viruses in this particular way. Very bad idea, and unfortunately we're going to have to live with the consequences of that.
The initial idea was simply destroy the weak, the elderly, and the sick, and the rest of the population would be more susceptible to our way of thinking, to our new world order. Obviously, we failed. Our COVID-19 mutated due to the milliwaves. The disease was unstoppable. Simply put, we failed.